Hi there. It's story time with Grandma again, and I have a new Christmas story to read to you. Today, the story is called The Christmas Wreath. And a wreath is, some of you have them on your door. They're usually round, and this one happens to be around a polar bear. The story is written by James Hoffman and illustrated by Jack Stockman. And again, the name is The Christmas Wreath. The elves' work was done for the year, and they were tired. They were too tired to put up their own tree on Christmas Eve. They knew Santa would be disappointed when he returned, but they had barely finished the last sleigh load of toys. How about a wreath, yawned Chief Elf. The truck-making elf just snored. The doll maker tucked a doll pillow under her head and sighed. The other elves blinked and shrugged. The last few nights they had even made toys in their dreams. Chief Elf gathered his last bit of energy to make a wreath from scraps of workshop material, pine boughs, a berry or two, and a leftover candy cane. Even the wreath looked tired. As he hung the wreath on the workshop door, Chief Elf said to himself, "Oh well, it's the thought that counts." Late that night, a hungry polar bear smelled the pine bough and the peppermint and thought of food. She followed the scent to the door where the wreath hung. As the polar bear rose up on her hind legs to take the candy cane, she bumped the wreath, which fell off its hook and slipped over her head. A very surprised polar bear now wore a wreath necklace. She tried to get it off, but the more she wriggled and shook, the tighter it became. Perhaps she thought it would come off in her world of ice and water. She lumbered across the ice and dove to the bottom of the bay through golden kelp and glistening seaweed. Still, the wreath did not come off. Instead, it collected strands of seaweed and sea flowers, and a small silver fish got tangled in the bow. Every time she came out of the water to breathe, the Arctic air froze the water on the wreath. Layers of ice were added, trapping underwater sea life in each layer. Soon the polar bear grew tired. She climbed slowly onto the frozen icy shore to rest. In the moonlight, shafts of green and blue and silver and gold reflected off the wreath. The polar bear would have been proud of her necklace if she knew how beautiful it now was. But she had to get it off. It was so heavy. She tried to snag it on jagged rocks and then tried to get it off on a fence post in the reindeer yard. Nothing worked. In desperation, she went back to the workshop door and stretched up, scratching the wreath against the door. Remarkably, the hook the chief elf had used caught the ice on the wreath, and the polar bear was free. She fled happily, rid of her icy necklace at last. Up above, Santa and his sleigh and reindeer were nearing home. Below, he saw dazzling rays of color that shone like beacons to guide his way. As Santa and the reindeer drew closer to the workshop, they stared in wonder at what they saw. On the workshop door hung a wreath wrapped in ice crystals, shimmering and glimmering in the moonlight. The familiar jingle of reindeer bells woke the elves. They were still half asleep as they stumbled out to greet Santa. They, too, were amazed to see the wondrous creation on their workshop door. The elves looked at each other in surprise when Santa thanked them for the beautiful wreath. They'd created a jewel-like Christmas wreath? An icy sculpture? How and when had they done that? The chief elf stroked his beard. How had his tired wreath become so glorious, he wondered. He remembered putting out a scraggly little, mess. He smiled as he gazed at the icy beauty, wondering about miracles and Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas. The end. No, that's the story. It's a story about Christmas miracles and wonderful things that happen around this holiday season. All right. Hope you enjoyed the story. Grandma loves you.